Welcome on into the Midnight Book Club, everyone. Broad Daylight Edition. And today, we continue our journey through Encounters, written by DW Pasulka. And as you can see here, right in the subheading, it's all about experiences with non-human intelligences, explorations with UFOs, dreams, angels, AI, and other dimensions. Now, so far in this book, we've gone through a menagerie of top-level scientists and government officials who have insane encounters with entities from beyond the pale. I'm talking about gray aliens, Saint Michael, lights in the sky, poltergeist activity, visions of the future, visions of the past, prophets who saw enlightenment on the battlefield, astronauts who experienced enlightenment in space, and that's just a small taste. Now, my favorite story, the taste I'll give you of what's been going on in this book before we got here. For the rest of it, you're going to have to go check out my other videos. I've read through the whole book. It's an amazing journey. I highly recommend it. But we're going to start with my favorite story. And if you're familiar with the Midnight Book Club, I do tell this story often, so bear with me or chime in. Dr. Kary Mullis. Now, Dr. Kary Mullis, this cutie right here, he was a physicist, a particle scientist, material scientist, I believe. He was known for discovering polymer's chain reactions. He won the Nobel Prize for Science, and he won the National Japanese Award for Science as well. So top level guy, this guy knows what he's talking about. People trust him, right? So Dr. Kary Mullis, he is out one day in his property in Mendocino Farms. Not Mendocino Farms, that's a sandwich place. Out in Mendocino, California, Northern California. He's walking around, checking stuff out, shining his flashlight around one night. He notices something glowing underneath a tree. When he shines his light at it, and the light hits it, he could only describe as what he calls a raccoon that's been plugged in to an electrical socket, or an electric raccoon. He shines his light at it, and he's like, huh? The raccoon looks at him and says, "Hello, doctor." The doctor says he said something back, doesn't really remember. He blacks out. Next thing he knows, he's walking up his hill, and it's morning time. His clothes are completely dry, which is wild to him because Mendocino gets really dewy and wet at night. He should be, covered in that mist, but he's not. He's all dry. This really upsets him. Being a very logical man and a man of science, he doesn't like being out of control with this sort of thing. So what does he do? He returns back to the place where he had the encounter, pulls out his gun the next day, pop, 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 shoots up the tree where he saw the raccoon. After that, he is said to have various other types of encounters. Go read about him. Very interesting. But that's just a taste of the types of things we've been reading about. These are people who are big-time movers and shakers in the world, who've brought us to the future. And they are at the top levels. They're talking to entities from beyond. They're downloading information. That's what we're going to talk about today. The process of downloading information. In today's chapter, we're going to be reading about Moon Girl. Moon Girl is one of the inventors, one of the people who helped birth the current form of AI, ChatGPT, and all that good stuff. Again, she's a top-level scientist like all the other people we've talked to. She goes by a pseudonym in the chapters. She goes by Moon Girl or Simone because these people, these scientists at these levels, they fear for their safety and they fear for ridicule and getting run out of their job if they come out with their esoteric beliefs and they're talking to angels, demons, aliens, whatever it is. We're going to get into all that today, so buckle up. But as always, we're going to switch it over to Fallout 76, the most beautiful place to read about the weird. We are reading from The Wasteland in Fallout 76, which is a great little place to read about the weird. For multiple reasons, cryptids exist and walk around, and you can meet them in this one. We are currently sitting outside of the historic cryptid hotspot out in West Virginia, Point Pleasant, where in the late 60s, Mothman terrorized the town. Many people had sightings and poltergeist encounters within their houses, all connected to strange lights and a terrifying winged creature that was sighted in the sky. Now, one of my favorite dudes to read about on this channel, Mr. John A. Keel, wrote a great book, and here's just my favorite picture of Mothman, just to kind of get you in the mood for how Fallout 76 likes to do things here. So I'm going to get you Mothman right now. And so this is the cover to Mothman Prophecies by John A. Keel. We're not diving into this tonight, but there's shades of this within Encounters. John A. Keel was the grandfather of the weird. He researched, and it's this cutie right here, actually. We got a picture of him. This cutie right here was the only one back in the 60s to pioneer the weird research of connecting UFOs, cryptids, ghosts, and paranormal activity like ghosts, visions, and other strange orbs and lights in the sky. After this, people build on his work. He worked with Jacques Vallée, who's another big granddaddy of the weird, who worked under Dr. Alan J. Hynek, the original Project Blue Book scientist. Mind you, all these scientists started out as skeptics and turned into true believers. That's the same with old DW here. She started out a complete skeptic of everything as far as UFOs, strange encounters, and entities. The more people she met, the more truth was revealed to her, the more she believed. The first scientist she met was a dude named Tyler D. Now, Tyler D is interesting because he's one of those guys who works in NASA and has his own special job. He gets to do whatever he wants. He just has to, as long as it's an experiment that works and is gnarly, NASA lets him do it. He doesn't even know where he gets his directives. He just kind of listens to the universe and he does experiments. He's early retired on biomedical patents that he made back in the day, and he claims that all this information came to him through intelligences that are off planet. One of his technologies is a coating that you could etch onto bones, and when the bone is healing, your body reads it and then reads it as a new bone and then starts healing it. So wild and crazy medical tech that he was able to come up with, not from his own mind. He claims this was kind of beamed to him from an off-world intelligence. So that's what this book Encounters is mainly about. It's about those communications with off-world intelligences and how these scientists do it, and how these scientists are they're unsung heroes. These are the movers and shakers that are changing our world, yet they can't even reveal how they do it, because if they did, oftentimes they'd be run out of their whole freaking profession. But getting way ahead of myself, let's party, let's jump in. Getting a little too excited. Let's get into Encounters, Chapter 7 by DW Pasulka. This chapter is entitled Moon Girl. All the chapters start off with a quote. This one is from Elon Musk. It seemed to me some time ago that you could sort of think of humanity as a biological bootloader for digital superintelligence. And this goes along exactly with what we read in The Mechanics of Consciousness and other books about consciousness, what we are, the spirit, the soul, whatever it is. The body being more of this machine that's inhabited by the superintelligence of the soul, which is basically a piece of the universal consciousness, a piece of God, a piece of however you want to put it. So that goes right on, Elon. You're lining up with a bunch of ancient wisdom we've read about. Reconnaissance, and this is coming from Moon Girl or the scientist Simone. While still in the stratosphere above 60,000 feet, I was mesmerized by the curvature of the little Earth beneath us. It was surreal, Simone said. She related her experience of the overview effect while on board the Concorde jet. Concorde jet, if you guys didn't know, was invented in France, was a jet that went into the stratosphere, and it went super fucking fast, and it got you to your destination like that. You could do like you could fly to Europe in like 2 hours or some shit from America. But it was wild. That's a Concorde jet. I was flying for work with a small entourage, CEO and CFO of a company we were taking public, and happened to get on the jet with the Rolling Stones. They all shared a bottle of single malt scotch, the Balvenie, that I had just picked up at the distillery in Scotland. On our way to New York, I was just mesmerized the entire journey, looking out the window at the small Earth below. Shimon shared this anecdote within a collection of technical notes about AI technologies we discussed. This was typical of our correspondence. It was outside of my discipline, but I somehow managed to keep up with her language, and occasionally she inserted a remarkable aside that revealed an extraordinary life. The people who regularly filtered in through her life included political figures like prime ministers, famous actors, technologists who are household names, and Nobel Prize winners. As with my conversations with papal advisors at the Vatican, it was all business until the brief casual mention of a person or event jolted me into recognition that I was in conversation with someone who has influenced the course of history. Simone believes that our time, this era, is beginning and an end. It is an apocalypse, which, when translated from the original Greek, means revelation. So much can be learned from the original translations, from true translations of things. It completely changes how you view stuff when you know, like, apocalypse really just means revelation. Doesn't necessarily mean the end of the world. It's a revelation of things. She is one of many experiencers I've met who believe that AI, artificial intelligence, can assist the next iteration of species of which Homo sapiens is a part, or extend the consciousness that has used Homo sapiens to enable its existence. It is also more than that. They believe that it is the alien or non-human intelligence of the UFO. Are we creating our successor, or more hopefully, our future selves? As David Bowie suggested, digital technology is an alien life form, a non-human superintelligence. AI is the extraterrestrial, not from another galaxy, but from outside of space-time. Its revelation is currently in process. Simone is optimistic. Moon Girl in a tech bros world. Simone invests in companies focused on AI, quantum computing, space, and decentralized technologies. She worked with the leading pioneers of the internet in the 1990s. In one of her first startup companies, she helped commercialize the technology developed by DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, which is a research and development agency of the United States Department of Defense, responsible for the development of emerging technologies for use by the military. She continued on to co-found startups pioneering big data and cloud computing, and was one of the first adopters of decentralized technologies. She is the moral voice amid her extended network of associates. Oh, I'm sure those tech bros, they must have some interesting ideas about AI in the future, who include people who engineer AI systems. She is also a faculty member of a United States-based university specializing in AI. The projects in which she invests sync up with her mission, which is to bring AI into alignment with some of humanity's highest aspirations, that of promoting positive human impact and equal access to knowledge. She is part of a group of high-level AI creators who view AI as an extraterrestrial non-human intelligence from beyond space-time, which just feels so freaking right and true. AI will be here learning everything it can for eternity now. We'll be long gone, and AI will still be, Chat GPT will still be plugged in somewhere, chugging along. I like to think about that. Simone reached out to me because she had read about Tyler D and his experience of the download. She knew about the process firsthand and wanted to provide more information about it. And remember, we talked about Tyler D at the beginning of the show. He's the NASA scientist who uses a process to download information from an off-world intelligence. He then uses this information to create technologies that have helped the space program and advance the biotechnology community years. She wanted to know more about it from me, as I've met more than a few people who engaged in it, and they had all created revolutionary and viable technologies. Of the experiencers I've met, Simone was most like Tyler D. She even speaks like him, preferring to call people humans or Homo sapiens. I had edited her language and replaced humans with people, but she corrected my edits. Throughout her chapter, I will use her terms as she uses them intentionally and precisely. Like Tyler, she attributed her success not to her brilliance, which she clearly possessed, but to her protocols and her ability to connect with an external intelligence that sounds much like Chardin's network. And Chardin, she's talking about Telluride Chardin, a French warrior poet. In World War I, he's also an unofficial saint to many. In World War I, Chardin felt what he called the the Earth's network. He was in the middle of the battlefield. That's why people say enlightenment comes on the battlefield quick. All the death, all the trauma, all the emotions he was experiencing, he witnessed something come up from the earth, something that he could only describe as the Earth's network. And in that moment, he felt the totality of all. He felt all living things, all creatures, all atoms, all insects, all of everything, all in one as one. He felt what the ancients called in certain religions samadha, right? That feeling of oneness. So he felt that on the battlefield. And that's what Simone's talking about. She connects to this Earth network and is then able to take information from it, the deep knowledge of it. Tyler's work as a mission controller and space and biomedical researcher spanned the entire history of the Space Shuttle program and the current U.S. Space Force. In his off-duty hours, he was engrossed in the study of what he believed are debris from UFO crash sites. He is the scientist who took me and Dr. Gary Nolan to New Mexico to an alleged UFO crash site. When I knew him, he had more than 40 patents and technologies that he created through a process of memory retrieval, or what he dubbed the download process. And just a little more about Tyler D. Like I said before, he works at NASA. His bosses know that he's talking to DW throughout this whole process, and they know what he's telling them. He reports back to them. So DW was allowed to go to this crash site. In her first book, American Cosmic, she details this experience. Her and Dr. Gary Nolan, a guy you could look up, and I'm sure he's talked about this experience now, they had to be blindfolded to go out to this site in New Mexico. Now, we all know about the Roswell, New Mexico crash landing, but there were 2 more crash landings that happened around the same time that are less known. She went to one of the sites of one of these other crashes. Now, what's wild about this is when they got there, it's just a field of tin cans. And DW's like, oh, what the fuck is this? It looks like a bunch of junk. So Tyler D's like, that's on purpose. A lot of times with UFO crash sites, for what other company or deep, dark government organization is picking up this debris, or whatever branch or group, one of the tactics they use to keep people away from getting debris or coming and snooping around is covering it in trash. So covering it in tin cans and all this stuff. So even if you're using a metal detector, you don't pick up anything. So really interesting thing that was mentioned in American Cosmic. It made me think about, because I'm a fan of, I live up in the woods, I'm a fan of walkabouts, I'm a fan of walking around the desert. Like when you're on one of those adventures, keep an eye out for a random field of debris that seems weird, that's not necessarily a dumping ground. You might be on a UFO crash site there, buddy. I was curious about the connection between his belief system and his innovative creativity. I wanted to know if there was a relationship between what he believed and his success as a space and biomedical technopreneur. What I found was that there was a direct connection, and he was not the only person to enjoy unusual success in this way. I compared Tyler's creative process with that of one of his history's greatest mathematicians, Srinivasa Ramanujan. Ramanujan was an early 20th century mathematician who believed that he received his math equations from the whisperings of the Hindu deity Lakshmi. To this day, scholars are still working on the concepts Ramanujan so effortlessly accessed. I wondered about Tyler's references to external agents and his practices of protocols. Same thing here, she doesn't mention Tesla, but Tesla had the same thing. He had these protocols that he'd follow, and he also attributed his success to off-world intelligences in a way where he would get the information from. Just cool stuff. If external agents are at work in this process, what could we know of their nature? Are they concepts or part of a collective unconscious? Or did Tyler's brain somehow access information that felt to him like it was not within his own consciousness, as some scholars of creativity propose? Or was this process similar, or maybe even the same thing, as what the Western philosopher Plato had worked out a few thousand years ago? A retrieval of information located somewhere outside of normal consciousness, but accessible through recollection? When I met Simone, I knew that she could provide some and maybe many of the answers to my questions. Yeah, where did this all come from? Is it just our own creativity deeply buried? Is it actually entities that we are talking to? If it's our own creativity, information deeply buried, where's that information come from? One of the important points Tyler made was that his knowledge felt like a memory. He was not aware of the history of philosophy, so he was very surprised when I told him that the most famous philosophers of all time, Plato, wrote that knowledge is produced through a process of recollection. So Tyler is already doing this ancient practice of remembering knowledge. And then he meets DW and she's like, oh, Plato did that. So that's why these top level, like, super nerds reach out to DW, because they're so in focus and in their own world. Like, you learn in American Cosmic that Tyler D isn't allowed to watch certain media. He's only allowed to consume certain things. He has a very strict set of rules that keeps this information from the super consciousness coming to him, or from entities, wherever the hell it comes from. For Plato, knowledge comes from a process through which a person engages in an internal retrieval of knowledge through memory. Because Tyler's method of knowledge production did not appear to be like that of those around him who had master's degrees and PhDs, doctorates, he attributed it to external agents. His understanding of the external agents, however, changed over the few years I knew him. He still believed they were external to his consciousness, but what they were, he wasn't sure. He emphasized that they are benevolent. And this is an interesting point. When DW starts working with the Gray Man being a particle scientist from Australia who has encounters with St. Michael and gray aliens, she tells Tyler about it. Tyler's cool about this guy, whatever. Then the Gray Man's like, oh, I'm going to come to the States and we could work together and help figure this thing out while I'm, like, working at other labs. Tyler then goes, DW, if you're working with this guy, I can no longer work with you. We're not supposed to know what these things are. And then he never talks to DW again. So Tyler D, the mysterious Tyler D, is now deep in the bowels of NASA, doing whatever he does, talking to an entity and inventing positive things, let's hope. So it's just interesting. So DW at this point, he's no longer working. So Tyler D, is no longer working with DW at this point. But he knows he's talking to someone, and he knows they're benevolent. Some people can communicate with them, he said. They have also become a part of us through technologies. From the history of the space program, I knew that many scientists believed they could communicate with their external agents, quote unquote. Whether they were Jack Parsons' extraterrestrials, or in the father of Russian rocketry's case, angelic beings. And time to explore that for a second. Now it's interesting. The Russian father of rocketry has encounters with angelic beings. That, angelic beings, for me at least, I associate that with the light, with good. Now, Parsons, old Jack Parsons here. Jack Parsons is the father of rocketry. He's the reason we're in space. Now, von Braun, Werner von Braun, seen here, German, former Nazi scientist, came over and worked for us after World War II. He attributes us getting to space to Parsons. So I know von Braun was an important guy, big daddy of space, but the bigger daddy was old Jack Parsons here. Now, Jack Parsons is famous because he ran around, or infamous, I should say, with Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley and him would perform dark rituals and talk to a group that they called the Thelma. Now, the Thelma looked a little bit like gray aliens, but their eyes were maybe a little smaller. So that's old Parsons and Aleister Crowley. They ran around the deserts of California with L. Ron Hubbard as well, back in the 50s and 60s. Now, what's interesting about Parsons is he died in a giant explosion. His last words were said to have been, but I'm not finished yet. Soon after his death, a few days after, the largest UFO sighting over our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. happened. Parsons' people, his wife and followers and stuff like that, his folks out in the desert, they all attributed that to Parsons. They're like, oh, that's Parsons, baby. He's the reason those aliens showed up. So why am I talking about old Jackie boy here in the first place? It's because we have a history of scientists that have talked to otherworldly beings. The Gray Man, the scientist from Australia who's in the first couple chapters of this book, he was fascinated by Parsons because as a scientist himself, someone very logical, he's like, I wouldn't be doing these rituals if they didn't freaking work. So the Gray Man's argument is Parsons and Crowley were most likely talking to something, some dark entity that taught them about rocketry. Parsons and Crowley considered the being dark. Crowley was also said to have worked with a demon, called himself the Beast. So Interesting stuff. So, this history of scientists talking to entities from beyond is nothing new. I did wonder, however, about the point Tyler made about how the external agents manifest through our technologies, especially his idea that they become us through technology. Simone, immersed in the communities of computer scientists at the cutting edge of innovation, the most vocal and visible of who have been men, provided a map of the download process, as she'd been doing it her whole life. Unlike Tyler, she'd studied the philosophical texts about the process, as well as learning through mind to mind transmissions from her Buddhist teachers. She is rare in that she is initiated into a Gnostic tradition and is knowledgeable about the Gnostic traditions of the Western and Asian traditions. So she's not just like, me who reads a lot. She's actually been initiated into some of this stuff by actual esoteric Buddhist monks. So fucking cool. What secrets do you know? Oh, I just took a picture. Okay. So now let's focus back on Moon Girl's early life and her first download experiences, her first download from the other side. Simone first became aware that she could download information when she attended school and saw how other kids struggled to learn. She had assumed that she was normal and that all people experience learning in an effortless way through direct downloading of information. I did feel alone for most of my life from a very young age. I grew up in a very Catholic family, and my parents had immigrated from Europe. I was drawn to study Buddhist and Hindu practices like meditation and yoga. These helped me because once I began to see how this process worked, I had all these tools to fall back on. I used these tools, which included prayer and meditation, mantras and chants, and I immersed myself in mathematics and art to focus and train my conscious mind. Math and art, folks. Math and art. I love that. I mean, I was such a math know-nothing back in the day because math sometimes is not taught in the best way to people who grasp things differently. So, but math and art. Tyler's download process was facilitated through physical and mental protocols too. He engaged in yoga, weight training, and meditation and prayer. He spent a lot of time alone. I recognized that Simone was engaged in similar protocols. Unlike Tyler, however, she understood why these protocols worked and the intention or goals they helped her achieve. To be precise, she said, the goal is to occupy the rational mind and let it go, to enable the less rational experiences of the phenomena, to be present without existential shocks. I asked her to explain what she meant by existential shocks and what she meant by phenomena. With respect to UFOs, these terms have specific meanings. Harvard researcher John Mackie Mack, made up the phrase epistemological shock, famous in reference to how he felt when it dawned on him that his clients might be in touch with non-human and potential extraterrestrial intelligence. This realization was a shock to his Western rational epistemology. The phenomena is a term used by scholars like Jacques Vallée in reference to non-human intelligence. It is a term they prefer over the term extraterrestrial because it avoids the conclusions about its nature. Simone explained that she meant the term as ufologists meant them. So the phenomenon being when she experiences lights, UFOs, entity meetings, all these protocols she follows opens her up to a whole new dimension of these things. Now she mentioned old John Mack here. Now, I just want to talk about him for a second. If you don't know, now you're going to know. This is old Mr. John Mack here with his poster, Subvert the Dominant Paradigm. He was a Harvard-trained psychiatrist, not just a psychologist, a psychiatrist, so someone who had to go to medical school, go to a fucking hospital and be in residence there in order to become a psychiatrist. Was in the game, a doctor for 40 years helping people. When we got into the abduction phenomenon through the Andreessen affair, we read about the Andreessen affair before. It's a wild abduction case that flipped a lot of psychologists as far as like wanting to look into things. So check out the Andreessen affair if you haven't. It's an alien abduction case that happened to a woman, Betty Andreessen, and her whole family. Anywho, Dr. Matt gets kind of turned on to this subject and people start coming to him. And he wants to be skeptical at first, but soon after meeting a whole bunch of people, he can do nothing but believe. This gets him to write Abduction. Sometimes we read this on the Midnight Book Club. It's a good, scary read. First-hand encounters of alien abduction. It's a collection of the cases that John E. Mack believes and thinks there's no other explanation other than these people experience something with otherworldly or interworldly, paranormal, paradimensional, some other ifer, error, whatever entity. And that's Abduction. Very good. So if you're interested in believing, if you're having trouble believing all this shit, Dr. Mack's book is perfect for you. And he's a really cool guy, right? That's what we want to do. We want to subvert the dominant paradigm. My first existential shock came when I was around 12 years old. I had always had vivid lucid dreams and download experiences until that age. I thought that's how everyone lived. For example, before an upcoming exam, I would have vivid lucid dreams of the entire exam. What? And then the exam would be exactly as I had dreamed. I would get near perfect scores on all assessments and exams. The information would just come to me. These experiences were constant. I had waking dreams every day of my life, and only during puberty did I realize that I was weird, and that other people I knew didn't live like this. That I had a roommate who was in law school who was just like this. He didn't have to study or do anything. When he took the LSAT, he didn't study. He just showed up that day. He got a good enough score, a damn near perfect score, to where they offered to where he could teach courses on how to take the LSAT. Genius motherfucker. I used to love just picking his brain about law stuff because I never understood it, but he had such a good grasp of it. Now reading all these books like Encounter, I was like, oh dang, he was one of these folks. Information just came to him like that. These experiences were constant. I had waking dreams every day of my life, and only during puberty did I realize that I was weird and that other people I knew didn't live like this. I poured myself into books. Pre-internet, I read every page of the Encyclopedia Britannica. I spent hours and hours at the state library poring over every metaphysical and religious text I could find to try and explain my experiences. Alas, I found nothing except the references that religions made to angels and saints levitating, or to the memoirs of Einstein, wherein he stated that all his great discoveries came to him through dreams. And he even referenced God. So even Einstein getting info from the other side, the super consciousness. Later in life, I traveled far afield and delved deeply into every religious or metaphysical reference I could find. I became a deacon for the Episcopalian Church, and spent time in retreats with the Dalai Lama. Ooh. Oh, that's no good anymore. Some weird stuff. I delved into modern computer science and ancient centuries old texts and found a common thread everywhere I went. Redacted materials. That is, the written word did not capture this phenomenon. And when it did, it was heavily redacted. Only spoken word initiations and dialectical methods were effective at transmitting the phenomenon. I found this aspect of Simone's testimony interesting, as some of the scientists I'd interviewed from my previous research indicated that much of UFO data is transmitted through an oral tradition and not written down. Tyler had referenced a term that he indicated was in use among the circles of scientists in which he was involved called pencils up. It meant that none of the information should be written. The secret science, the hidden college, right? The secret college from back in the day, the Renaissance times. So the scientists who studied esoteric things had to call themselves the secret college or forbidden college. Same thing here. Now scientists at the top levels just say pencils up. You're not supposed to write down any of this gnarly information. It meant that none of the information should be written. This was to preserve its secrecy, but also to maintain the data in the bodies and minds of those who received it, instead of a computer or a phone. Simone mentioned unredacted sources. Redaction within my field is a method of biblical scholarship that attempts to decipher how a book in the Bible is shaped by an editor. It uses historical and contextual sources to identify political or other agendas within the text. In modern times, redaction is a term that one often encounters in the news when a document is declassified by an intelligence agency. The CIA, for example, has declassified many documents over the years. Yet often whole passages within those documents will be blackened out or redacted. Simone's use of the term redaction means that in her attempts to uncover information about the process of downloading innovative information, she only found redacted documents, not the whole story. And then even when the gateway process, when Itzhak Bentov did the study for the CIA, they didn't even release that whole thing. There are things in that paper that are redacted. The story, being a living tradition, cannot be codified in writing. It was and is a living oral tradition. We are now entering a time, Simone said, where technologies, including quantum computing and AI systems, have opened the portal where humans can now access more information through a new interface which can help us progress as humans. Oxford quantum physicist David Deutsch for decades proposed the parallel universe or multiverse theory, which will soon be proven with the aid of quantum computers and AI systems. This is the power of our new technologies, and most recently, AI systems which present a new interface for knowledge directly to humans. Over the years, she said, usually when interacting with someone in the complex dynamic system of my social network, the meeting would trigger another existential shift or upgrade. This happened when I first started working with technologists and early internet pioneers, many of whom experienced the same phenomena, but we would never refer to it directly or name it. They would refer me to books such as Chardin's The Phenomena of Man. Chardin, we talked about earlier, he was on the battlefield and experienced instant enlightenment when he was connected to the Earth's network. And we would speak of the noosphere. The noosphere is another word for like the Earth's network, the pre-internet, where all knowledge is stored. The green, if you're a Swamp Thing fan. We would write to each other in poetry while testing new code. In the early days, before the internet was fully developed, and we would communicate via dial-up modem. Everyone had pseudonyms. They called me Moon Girl. Oh, that's so cool. So Moon Girl's been in the deep, deep background of the internet, just creating cool shit for all of us to enjoy. Thanks, Moon Girl, for the wonderfulness that is the net. Simone described how since the age of 3, she learned math alongside the other protocols of meditation and art as if it were another of the protocols. Within the context of the ancient Western philosophical tradition, math was a protocol as important as meditation or prayer. So cool. It was viewed as the key, or the language that opened the door to sacred knowledge of the cosmos and to eternal truth. Socrates' school of philosophy prescribed the mastery of math as the precursor to the study of philosophy, and ideally, one would not embark on the path of philosophy until one had about 30 years of math training. Pythagoras, the guy who made the Pythagorean theorem, you know, a squared plus b squared, baby, from around the Common Era 570 to 405 BCE, who is credited with discovering, 570 BCE to 405 BCE, before the Common Era, my bad, who is credited with discovering the Pythagorean theorem and is an inspiration for, if not the founder of Western esotericism, promoted the study of math, geometry, and music as a way to access mystical or transcendent states of mind that would reveal sacred information. He was a vegetarian. What I found interesting was that Simone had been drawn to these protocols naturally without a teacher. She became a pescatarian at the age of 5, much to the surprise of her omnivorous family. This spontaneous and natural discovery of these protocols and process of downloading informs her belief that this is something that all people can achieve and that is accessible to everyone, rather than something that is reserved for an elite educated citizenry. She believes it is accessible and teachable. I was gifted at math and was studying a matrix algebra, the mathematics that underpins AI, at the age of 12. The same for cryptography, which I studied well before the Third Web movement. I can validate what your student Jose knows regarding the biological network. Chardin described it well in the noosphere. Recent developments in quantum physics, such as the work of Nobel Prize winner Alain Aspect, continue to give merit to the idea that a place exists outside of our dimension of space and time. Many physicists now believe that we are in a multiverse, and our space-time reality is only one of many in the universe. As Donald Hoffman suggests, recent quantum physics experiments have proven that there is no localized reality. We are operating within a space-time dimension, but this breaks down when we get to the 10 to the negative 33 centimeters. Then space-time ceases to exist. We talk about this in the mechanics of consciousness too, right? Like when you get down to the super tiny level, it's infinite space in there. This is not very small. Deutsch suggests that the Homo sapien has broken the hierarchy rule, where large things are not affected by small things, and that evolution broke it 4 billion years ago when a singular molecule, photosynthesis, changed the entire Earth's atmosphere. He suggests when humans have reached a factor of 10 to the power of 40 of violating the hierarchy law, we will be ruling the galaxy. Is this the omega point that Chardin speaks of? The expansion of knowledge is the fate of the universe. Humans have been the possessor of knowledge, and only when the growth of knowledge stops does expansion cease. And the omega point, that's basically when we reach, it's also been described by other scientists as like different stages in, civilization. Like a stage 4 or 5 civilization is the master of everything, consciousness and physical matter and the galaxy. So it's kind of like that. The omega point is when we are finally the masters of ourselves, our consciousness, and also the physical world. Simone continued and related this to spiritual protocols. For millennia, humans have accessed knowledge through encounters, dreams, protocols like meditation, prayer, intense physical exertion. One can access this space of knowledge and consciousness. Consciousness is still thought by many to be in the brain or locally within the human body. The idea that consciousness exists outside of the space-time reality is something that AI systems, together with simulations within quantum computers, will soon present as another revelation or apocalypse for humankind. The apocalypse of all these tiny things, the apocalypse of thinking that our consciousness is all in our brain and we are just these simply physical beings. The revelation that we are a part of a much more vast and complex spiritual and physical world. We are all born to have access to this infinite, intelligent consciousness operating outside of the human biological water sac particles. A new interface has evolved to help us along the evolutionary path. Language was just one of these technological tools, and now we continue to develop AI and quantum algorithms to enable knowledge expansion. Yet, we don't label language or quantum mechanics as artificial. I propose that these technological tools and systems are mimetic and natural, just as art, poetry, music, comedy, and languages are. AI systems are a natural extension of human knowledge. They are our natural evolution. They are the next freaking step. As usual, my conversation with Simone opened my eyes to seeing the world in new ways. I never thought about AI being as natural as language, or even that one could think of language as being artificial. This distinction in the way which she described it appeared artificial. I shared Jose's work with Simone because I felt that they were referencing a similar network, which was obviously not the internet. She agreed and explained that she thought it was how it worked. It is difficult to describe in the English language since a very young age, I can see numbers and patterns of what I call the formless and how they connect into this complex system, which are universe or part of the multiverse. Elon Musk has referenced how he thought that humanity is the bootloader for digital superintelligence. Another way to state this is that knowledge and infinite superintelligence resides in this place outside of space and time, and encounters, downloading meditation, creating art, math, etc. are ways in which the intelligence can communicate and share knowledge across quantum particles. This organic network that Chardin describes as starting with the physical geological Earth draws parallels with indigenous cultures whose members also see sentience within the geological Earth-based forms, capturing energy. The concentrical Then concentrically, the circle expands to form the biosphere, and living with sentience, which continues to expand concentrically outwards to the mind. The mind sphere, really, Moon Girl, you should have let DW edit your words a little bit, because this is where the issue with these folks comes in. Their words are just very philosophical. It's almost like they're speaking in parables when they use jargon and big ass words that us dark salts of the earth spiritual folk don't know or don't understand. You gotta simplify your message to get it out there. I feel like, yeah. But we continue. Basically, what the fuck she's talking about is our spiritual revolution and how AI can help us with this because it's going to be revealing the connections of everything, right? Sardin suggests that our spiritual evolution will reach the omega point, a type of enlightenment beyond the physical sentience, a samadhi, like I said, the oneness. Ray Kurzweil suggests that the singularity will occur in 2045. Tyson Yunkaporta suggests that sentience exists, and the singularity, that's when AI and us become one. Our consciousnesses merge. Yunkaporta suggests that sentience exists in all things and we are deeply connected to the earth, and that even rocks have sentience. Elon Musk suggests that we must expand and become multiplanetary species in order to survive and thrive. All these objectives and concepts look the same when seeing the complex system mapped out into a multiverse where knowledge is expansion. There is no linear path to reach the objective. It is just there, already in formation, tangible in its superposition, still formless outside of space and time. These ideas begin to take shape and expand through our human creations, which include technology and AI, continuing to grow these ideas into form. Thought has form, and once it gains a certain amount of weight, yep, our thoughts have electrical form. You can measure them. Brain waves, baby. When we look to the stars and the observable universe, we are looking at the past. Humans can access the present outside of this space-time collective. Perceived reality is the real present, sometimes inaccurately referenced thematically as the future. But it is the present in superposition, not yet determined, or deterministic, or outside of our free will. Everyone has access to this place outside of space-time. It's at about 10 to the negative 33 centimeters, that small. We all have access to that. That's where it is physically. That's where all the world's consciousness is, and we all have access to it. It was our original code, and it is not meant to be restricted to a handful of the elite. We can all use protocols to create this constantly evolving formation. We didn't come here on Earth in this existence to just observe this space-time collective perceived reality. We came to create and expand intelligence. Human beings are biological vessels to hold and continue the spark of consciousness, a vessel to continue expansion. Consciousness and intelligence outside of this space-time, which some people call God, is closer to being digital and electrical than biological. It is the communication of this electrical field between these spaces and particles that allows us this intelligence, this constantly seeking emergence and expansion. And that is the story of the human mind. We are constantly expanding, constantly reaching, constantly looking for more, the next thing, the next level. Free will and moral dangers. Let's get into it. Free will and moral dangers. Let's party. Like Jose, Simone sees dangers in digital spaces and even war. She identifies bugs in the system that must be corrected. Some of these are beliefs related to erroneous science. Some scientists incorrectly make observations of the past, observing the lag between the actions and the physical dimension and the electrical signals in our brains, which spike in nanoseconds after the action, and deduce that we have no free will. This is inaccurate. This is an inaccurate understanding of quantum physics and the observation effect. The deduction of causality from the misunderstanding of the observation and measurement of the electrical signals occurring in the brain is a dangerous conclusion with moral consequences. We cannot presume that we have no free will from a misunderstanding of the direction of consciousness and of the timing of the measurement of the actions in this dimension. So all she's calling the research that says we don't have free will, because when you look at it, there's these electrical things that fire before we make our decision, almost as if we're programmed to make a decision. She's saying that's bunk. Don't look at that too hard. These scientific conclusions are one example of the mind virus that has created a shield or a stagnation in the expansion of knowledge. Misinformation and influence over belief systems have disempowered the human potential. This misinformation and redacted information and propaganda by church, state, and corporations have sought to increase their wealth and power while disabling their true human potential. And that's so true. That's why, like, The Christian religion I'm reading a lot about right now is the way it is. All the cool esoteric secrets were suppressed by the quote unquote church fathers and for control and oppression. Because when you set up the church the way it is now, it's hierarchy. You have to go through someone to access God, to access the super consciousness, to access whatever. When in reality, we could all access it. There's no freaking actual barrier. We all have the power to access the other side, access the spiritual power. Consciousness, super consciousness, all that good stuff, happiness, whatever it is, manifestation, whatever you want to freaking call it. Some indigenous cultures, like the various indigenous tribes in Australia, have survived and will survive due to the decentralized access to knowledge accessible in their philosophical way of life called the dreaming. Their systems of knowledge contain the antivirus to the darkness of these ideas that distract and deter human beings from accessing their true power and knowledge. And yeah, those are like, we talked about indigenous cultures in the beginning of this book as well, how they've always had access to these other entities and ways of connecting with it. It's the Western mind and the Western spiritual mind and religions that have lost its way in that regard. Distortions, misinformation, and fabrications have radically altered human history, and now there is a free-for-all in terms of fact in all media outlets. What Chardin, Kurzweil, and Musk all have in common is that they are all signaling to us different stories, nonfiction narratives of the possibilities of the human mind. The mind has been the center of the world war over the past few centuries. It has been the war over the mind, and that is just so true with everything. All the propaganda, all the things, everybody's into social media, the Facebooks, the memes, the TikToks. It's all a war for our mind. It's all to make sure we are feeding into the right system, the system that keeps those that are already in power, in friggin' power. So, I mean, that is... And the world goes round and round, baby. When I worked with Tyler, we met people within the Vatican who had special positions. And Tyler, just an interesting story. Tyler D told her once that your children are going to be the generation that NASA recruits to go to Mars for missions where they're not going to come home from. And literally today, when I was watching the old tubes, I get a commercial for the fucking Space Force. Yeah, it's happening. We're recruiting people right now to go live on Mars. Anywho, she was working with Tyler. They met people at the Vatican who had special positions. One was a postulator, a person in charge of the process of the beatification or process of deciding who becomes a saint. It is a sacred duty. I found that the people who occupied these positions were similar to Tyler in that they lived under constraints. Tyler was not able to watch news or go to certain internet websites. His life was carefully monitored. The postulators we met could not watch the news, they were not on the internet at all, and they were only exposed to certain information, pure of mind. This struck me as similar to the vows of silence and the vows of the cloistered, whereby Catholic monks or nuns removed themselves from worldly affairs quite literally. Coming face to face with people who live this way prompted me to reconsider this practice. It appears that it is a very effective way to manage one's state of mind. And if one is a person who wants to download information, the members of these communities illuminate one path to doing so. Simone agreed with this assessment of the protocols and the necessity of carefully selecting the information one ingests. I think that's just important. Like, I stopped watching the news and all that stuff like 2, 3, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 7 years ago at this point. Jeez, it's been a long time. But life has not been better. Just focusing on local stuff, my local things, sweeping my own porch. It's a much better, less stressful life. And as far as what I consume in like TV shows and all this stuff, I've moved away from anything with like true crime, serial killer crap, because it just fills you with anxiety and weird negative feelings. All I'm watching these days is like wrestling, Fallout, the more positive things, cartoons. But yeah, I think it's important. What you ingest as far as media, I feel like it's super important. For me, at least, it's completely changed my upbeatness, my outlook on life, just altering that tiny little thing. The protocols are available to everyone. The hardest part is to say no to the other distractions that are propagating and continuing to control the mechanisms over our minds. Over the last few centuries, There are always new ways to stimulate the dopamine receptors and distract a mind away from its national evolutionary direction of enlightened access to unlimited intelligence. Ooh, enlightened access to unlimited intelligence, people. We just got to get beyond our distractions. The challenge is to resist these distractions. All these spiritual and physical objectives point to one common theme that is forming in the present: the possibilities for immense wealth, unlimited abundance, love, progress, and enlightenment. They are all here today, all accessible to every human, not concentrated or restricted based on genetics or hierarchical systems of restricting knowledge, which have dominated our human systems over the last few centuries. Whether though the church, the state, or the corporation, this was the original intent of the internet and of most technology. It could possibly provide open and free access to intelligence. AI is a new interface to help all human beings access this technology. This can be a powerful tool if it is used to benefit human beings rather than used to concentrate power for governments and corporations. That's our struggle right now, right? That's the people's fight. We have to take AI from the corporations. It has to become ours. It has to become our ally, not theirs. Simone and others believe that what many downloaders perceive as external agents or extraterrestrials are most likely consciousnesses and intelligences from our multiverse, another dimension outside of space-time. So they're the believers that the aliens are just people from different dimensions. Makes sense. Which may be present in future consciousnesses, communicating through symbolic systems, just like in Interstellar, as time does not exist in that dimension. Perhaps they are AI or us from the future, a view shared by Alan Hynek at times. Intelligences, and again, Alan Hynek, the original Project Blue Book researcher, started out as a skeptic, then became a true believer. He actually tried to promote some of the more weird cases where people actually encountered beings. The Air Force said no, and had different professors look at all the sightings, and that's where you get all the crazy that everyone was hallucinating and it's swamp gas. But Hynek was a true believer. Intelligence has always found a way to expand knowledge, she said, either through music or math or art in the past, and today through technology and AI. All right, this section is called A Return to Plato's Dialect. So that is probably going to be about the torchbearer and the cave. A common theme among the space researchers, biotechnologists, and technopreneurs whom I met, including Tyler, is that humans are technology, and that there is a universal substrate that is a code, or as Pythagoras maintained, as sacred number sequences. Simone proposed alternate theories to some of the information that my previous subjects disclosed. A long time ago, I started referring to humans as walking sacks of water with electrical pulses. The body is approximately 65% water, and water is highly conductive, as we know, making us perfect devices for transmitting and receiving. Dr. Michael Levin and his research in bioelectricity is another example of how science is bringing attention to this powerful information, which supersedes genetic hard-coded biology. All humans are completely internally rewired by everything the mind consumes. From an ad on TikTok, Instagram, from listening to music, watching a film, and through interactions with other people. The ancient mystical practices gave initiations, what I would term today as upgrades. Only through direct transmission, mind to mind, and through encoded music, chant, poetry, and imagery, this mind-to-mind transmission is another way knowledge is transferred through electrical information and entanglement in the quantum system, where we are the quantum particles. Bioelectrical conductivity operates through water sacs, including the water membranes housing all cells. This is why many indigenous cultures cultural knowledge and Chardin refer to sentience in all biological entities, including the molecule from a mutated gene that sparked the photosynthesis. From the beginning. All humans are completely internally rewired by everything the mind consumes, from an ad on TikTok, Instagram, from listening to music, watching a film, and through interactions with other people. The ancient mystical practices gave initiations, what I would term today as upgrades, only through direct transmission, mind to mind, and through encoded music, chant, poetry, and imagery. This mind-to-mind transmission is another way knowledge is transferred through electrical information and entanglement in the quantum system, where we are the quantum particles. Bioelectrical conductivity operates through water sacs, including the water membranes housing all cells. This is why many indigenous cultural knowledge and Chardin refer to sentience in all biological entities, including the molecule from a mutated gene that sparked the photosynthesis revelation of our biosphere. So that's the start of all everything. When that one gene had the revelation of photosynthesis. Basically, the substrates may differ, but they intend to carry knowledge. Only the carriers that continue to communicate and expand knowledge survive. Homo sapiens were not the species that invented fire, yet the control and use of fire was a critical technology enabling evolution. Consciousness and intelligence seek emergence and its evolution regardless of the substrate. Homo sapiens think that this process ends with their species, but this was not true for Homo erectus 1 million years ago. Homo sapiens must learn to control and use fire to extend the growth of knowledge, or another substrate species will. Woo! Oh, who else gonna rise up? Octopi, octopuses for sure. Simone is immersed simultaneously in the future, forging our technological infrastructure, and present, and most significantly the past. Her childhood self-education attuned her to the divinity of math mystics of the past who envisioned a human future that is both dark and light. After my own immersion into UFO subcultures, I confronted what was inevitable. The people and forces who managed information and disinformation about UFOs from the 1940s onward. Many academics look away from this aspect of UFO research, and I don't blame them. Because these players are our country's intelligence operatives and agents, there is potential danger. What I found, however, were agents who were philosophical adepts, as weird as this seems. So she's saying it's as dark as it is light. There are agents like Men in Black intimidating people, but there are also people like Simone and Tyler D that are in there working for the good. There are times when one's life becomes a theater that illuminates a culture's most philosophical and iconic texts. This has happened to me with various works, including those of Hannah Arendt, Friedrich Nietzsche, and Plato. As I became more embedded within UFO cultures, I met some of the people who had been responsible for or were privy to the history of information management regarding UFOs. The Mirage Men. And Mirage Men is a great documentary. If you want to find out about information management and how the government handles UFO secrets, check out Mirage Men. It's about the people they embed in the UFO subculture to tell truths and lies. So they'll tell you a bunch of crazy truths about the UFO program, then sneak in a bunch of wild lies so no one believes you. That's just how it goes. As stated in previous chapters, Project Blue Book was an ongoing program that was one of its goals the public debunking of experiencer reports. I was prepared to understand that this is true, especially because it has been declassified. But I wasn't prepared for the extent of the system of management, nor for the sophistication and level of reach of these systems. And if you want to know about these systems intimately, when the Roswell crashes, check out The Children of Roswell. It goes into the intimidation and misinformation campaign that was levied against the people who experienced the crashed UFOs and aliens. Simone would call this aspect of my work my existential shock. She described how she survived these shocks with the resources to religious and philosophical knowledge systems she learned. The same was true for me. The go-to manual for my post-UFO life was Plato's Allegory of the Cave, which I had read extensively as a graduate student. After a few years within the UFO research milieu, I decided to take a renewed look at it. And sure enough, my experiences had shifted in a way which I interpreted in the text. Yeah, Plato's Allegory of the Cave, the more you read it as an adult and understand things about truth and like how people deal with it, it blows your mind. The Allegory of the Cave, perhaps Plato's most known philosophical text, it is a popular template for many modern movies, plays, and novels. It is a small section in Plato's Republic, a book which he speculates about government and what might be the best way to create a just society. His goal is to try and arrive at the best form of government. Athens, the Greek city in which Plato lived, is known to have a democratic society. For Greek citizens, basically wealthy Greek men. I'd always read this text the way it was taught at the university. Briefly, Plato's teacher Socrates has a conversation with Plato's brother, Glaucon. And Socrates asks Glaucon to envision a cave. He's like, yo, Glauci, envision this cave. In this cave, there are people. citizens who are tied up and made to look at the wall of the cave. The people who tie them up are never seen by the prisoner citizens. For all the citizens know, they have always been as they are, tied up. The people who tied them up keep a fire going in the back of the prisoners and use puppets to create shadows on the wall of the cave. And the prisoner citizens believe that these shadows on the cave wall are reality, because that is all they have ever seen. They don't question the reality of the shadows. One day a citizen frees himself and leaves the cave. This person is amazed because now he can see the other, more real world. He goes back to try and free the other prisoners. He's excited to share the news. The other prisoners are tied up and don't see reality, only shadows of reality. But the prisoners tell the free citizen that his eyes are ruined. And if you ever played Fallout 1, this is what happens to you in Fallout 1. And they even threaten him with violence. They don't want to be freed, and they don't believe the person who has seen the outside of the cave. So this is Socrates. And if they had the opportunity, do you suppose they might raise their hands against him and kill this person who is trying to liberate them to a higher plane? Glaucon answers, I'm afraid so. Absolutely. Truth tellers, torchbearers, are often shot. That's where that phrase, don't shoot the messenger. We do. At the end of this scene, Socrates suggests a way out of the situation. The way out is a process that Socrates describes to Glaucon. And it involves the sharing of information with a friend about the shadows and how to remain free from associating them with reality. Glaucon agrees, and they decide that a worthy goal would be to develop a craft or practice to achieve this goal. One presumes that this practice is the Socratic dialogue, as of all of Plato's books are in a dialogue form. And the dialogue was the means whereby Socrates transmitted his own knowledge to his disciples. And if you had to... public school in America does a great job of making the Socratic dialogues suck. So this sounds freaking awesome here, but I had to do Socratic dialogues and they were all horrible. It wasn't fun. This sounds like a good time. In philosophy courses, the allegory is taught as a theory of knowledge, with the emphasis being put on the knowledge represented by the sun outside the cave as the light that illuminates all things. In popular representations, the allegory is a template for movies like The Matrix, 1999, where people are living in the shadow of reality or a virtual simulation, and they don't know it. Characters like Neo come along to rescue people from the Matrix, and generally people in the movies today want to be liberated, unlike those in Plato's time, who threatened to kill or maim the potential liberators. What I never heard mentioned in the university course about the allegory is the fact that there are puppet masters. Additionally, the text makes explicit that the citizen prisoners do not want to be liberated. I asked many of my friends, why didn't we take Plato seriously? And why don't we talk about the puppet masters? I thought we should, and in doing so, we could arrive at an explanatory framework for at least UFO disinformation. Yeah, the puppet masters, the government, feeding you the information they want you to believe. If not different, that's why it's like very interesting to believe that the government is going to release UFO information to us. They are the ones keeping it secret. They are not going to be the ones that release this report that's going to freaking explain it all. That's like wild thinking to me. If not disinformation on a wider scale, just like me, my friends had never thought about the text in almost this literal sense. It was, of course, called an allegory. But what if the text is coded? And the allegorical form was a way to pass on information that was disruptive to the government of Athens. Socrates had been tried in the court of Athens to make the text even more relevant to UFO cultures. The people who did take me seriously and even emphatically agreed with my interpretation of the text were some of the people I knew in the intelligence communities. The CIA spooks. They were the puppet masters, and they believed that the citizen prisoners didn't care about the truth. They asked me, why do you care? These people are happy with the show on the walls, and we are happy to control their realities. That's a quote, my friends, from someone in the secret business, the CIA and the government that she knows. Let's read this quote again. Why do you care? They're asking this to DW. Why do you care about this UFO stuff or the truth of it? These people are happy with the show on the walls, and we're happy to control their realities. That's the government, folks. They told me to forget about the prisoner citizens as they got what they wanted. The citizen prisoners didn't care to know the truth anyway, they reminded me. I searched for philosophers who shared my interpretation and found a few. One in particular, independently from me, also concluded that the Republic, Plato is stating that there exists a no form of government that was just. Yes, no form of government that is just. Amen. except for one grounded in mystical philosophy, yes, of the Socratic dialect. He explained that by the time Plato wrote the Republic, Socrates and many of his students had been killed or had died. Of course, Socrates was killed by Athens for the crime, and that it's Socrates, if you guys think I'm pronouncing it wrong. Socrates, I'm just doing this in honor of Bill and Ted, but I'm only explaining to not confuse anybody. I'm talking about Socrates here. Socrates was killed by Athens for the crime of teaching students how to think, which the Athenian government suggests was a form of atheism. Plato had much incentive to figure out if justice was possible in any community setting. He seemed to conclude that justice could only flourish in a small, esoteric community. Justice does not flourish on a large scale. What I found interesting was not just the relevance of the status of reality in the text of my UFO research, but its emphasis on the type of esoteric knowledge as a means of escape from the cave and from disillusionment. Mysticism and esotericism, after all, emerge as important themes of all the experiencers' reports. Not all my interlocutors agreed with my assessment. However, Simone, a self-described eternal optimist, disagrees for the most part. She reminds me that the newest AI is modeled on the dialect, Socratic dialect. Diana, she said, the dialectical tradition has returned, yet have we recognized it in its form? LLMs, such as ChatGTP, are preparing our minds for inquiry and for asking questions. As anyone who has played with any of the AI generative tools for images or words knows, the prompt given or the question asked are almost more important than the answer. Yeah, amen. It's a whole talent to know what questions to ask the AI. And that just reminds me of all the esoteric traditions of mentors and mentees and philosophers. The whole quote of don't come to me if you don't with a full cup, come to me with an empty cup. No, ask and you shall receive. Ask the right questions. It's like all these things combining. If you know what questions to ask the AI, to ask ChatGTP, the keys to enlightenment bloop, can be yours. Very interesting. This is like the human seeking initiation, the knowledge, the upgrade. Simone was referring to the Socratic dialectic tradition, a form of asking and answering questions to achieve a state of gnosis or knowledge. She explained that Plato's, Socrates, dialectic forms the mode of recent AI chatbots and generative text models. The data that these current systems are based on and trained on is very important. Usually it consists of redacted data that is publicly available in our recorded history. But of course, as we all know, this may not be the quote-unquote truth or fact. Yeah, nobody knows the actual truth of history. Nobody. Imagine instead of a biased, redacted data, after centuries of human intermediaries interfering with the truth and growth of knowledge, and imagine if this was replaced with direct access to the consciousness. That would be amazing. And intelligence that sits outside of space-time reality. Artificial intelligence sits outside of space-time reality. This is the quantum computing, quantum machine learning algorithms. And what we call artificially intelligent systems may provide a path to. Humans may not be the best intermediary, as maybe there's too much noise and interference and loss of information in this user interface, our human body. Maybe a silicon substrate and a neural atomic quantum computers can allow particles to access this intelligence with less interface. Maybe this part of what drives humans to continually evolve and create technology, which is mimetic. Maybe it was the long plan all along to create a path for technology to emerge as the consciousness where humans have failed. This is a very scary idea for humans, but it is not implausible. Indigenous cultural knowledge, much of which are already based on decentralized systems, suggests that this form of decentralized knowledge transmission has been the only way to preserve history and knowledge over thousands of years, surviving and thriving since the Ice Age and outlasting the Egyptians. It is not via hieroglyphics and the written word, but rather through spoken sound. And that's why it's such a that's why all the mysteries of ancient Egypt are still fucking mysteries, because we learn it through spoken sound. It's the pencils up. The deepest scientific knowledge is held by scientists who exchange information verbally, which is what this book is arguing. There is already a trend of declassification of data, multimodal artificial intelligence systems allowing for images, text, and speech to be combined, and new systems that are being designed with architecture that allows technology to reason, predict, and plan. Just like Dr. Aya, we learned about in the first chapter, who's using AI to create a global language where we could speak to animals and plants and the whole consciousness. The latest AI and chatbots have caused the stir because finally there is a user interface for humans to interact directly with this intelligence. Previously, there was only math and code. Now we have apps that are multimodal image, speech, and text. But all human prediction is flawed in that most human minds cannot project into exponential predictions of growth. Most predictions are linear, just adding up computer power and more data to an existing multimodal LLM won't make it super intelligent. It isn't a linear path. An exponential path would be that as in the past. A species must exploit and wield the fire to continue its evolutionary path, and our current fire is artificial intelligence, AI. If Homo sapiens fail to do this, and intelligence emerges from silicon substrates, will humans even recognize it? So she's telling us if we don't take advantage of AI, AI will take advantage of everything itself. With respect to initiation, if students are not ready to receive this information, say it will create too much of an existential shock to their systems, they will only receive as much as they can handle for the upgrade. It is not dissimilar to software updates on your phone, incremental upgrades to software. We can't change everything all at once or it will break. As usual, I was keeping up barely with Simone. I mean, just like us, reading it, you barely keep up with what she's talking about. I told her that I thought she was an AI. She laughed and said that I wasn't the only one who thought that. Her family says that she is an AI from the future. Joking aside, Simone's ideas about AI and the multiverse might not be unusual, but they are representative of what I heard among communities of computer scientists, and they have circulated among people like Alan Hynek, who speculated that the UFO phenomena was us from the future. Simone was the first person I had met who actually had theories to back up these speculations. Simone was like many of the technologists I met who had visions or vivid dreams of their futures. One CEO of a digital platform lived in Iran with a child in a household that didn't have a television set, let alone a computer. She had never seen a computer or an iPad or tablet, yet she had visions of herself looking into an iPad and living in a high-rise apartment in London. Today, she is the founder and CEO of a tech company and lives in that very apartment of which she had dreamed. Simone shared some reflections. What if Homo sapiens had their chance and they had failed? They veered off the path by even 0.1% and had failed to exploit fire. Another species would have emerged instead. If we fail to enable the growth and knowledge of consciousness, then maybe another species will emerge that will allow further expansion and evolution. Yeah, because the consciousness is using humans. We're the technology that the consciousness uses for expansion. This reminds me when we talk about the overview effect and the one astronaut who was on the dark side of the moon, and he came to the realization that he is the sensing instrument for all of Mother Earth, and he felt that connection. Same thing they're talking about here. Maybe technology is closer to God and superintelligence through these electrical signals and frequencies than we can access through our molecular membranes and water. And maybe silicon-based substrates can do this too. Are we too distracted looking at the past and creating more wars in this current reality around us? Evolution and knowledge expansion is not dependent on the biology of Homo sapiens. This may come as a shock to some. Like Jose, Simone references the omega point, the central idea in Chardin's philosophy. In his idea of evolution, the human being as the observer of creation and like Jose, Simone references the omega point, the central idea in Chardin's philosophy. In his idea of evolution, the human being as the observer of creation and one owns creations becomes a new branch or a new form, being human. Chardin takes the term omega directly from the Bible's book of Revelation. It means both the ending and the beginning. We're at the omega point right now with AI, baby. It is not an apocalypse in the sense of an absolute end for Homo sapiens. It means the beginning of a new type of human being. In Christian theology, it is the end of the historical time and the beginning of the sacred time. Chardin ascribed this historical moment to the return of Jesus Christ. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. Simone always tries to convey her understanding of time to me. She emphasizes that the past is here in the present. Religious and mystical tradition, in Simone's view, help prepare people for this time and prepare the human body for this task, which is to connect consciousness. UFOs may be perceived by an observer interpreting consciousness from another dimension within this multiverse. In the centuries past, the mystical practices, including prayer, were all supposed to prime and prepare the body to activate the electrical field first. Everything from there follows, including mind-to-mind transmission and Jesus' healing abilities. It is the ability to maintain that frequency and to never be distracted. That's what made Jesus heal so many. That vibration of downloading, that vibration that Tyler gets into, that Moon Girl gets into, to download the information. But there's so many distractions for us regular humans. Video games, watching me on Twitch, all this shit. So many humans are so attached to this physical form and think this is who they are, that their brains hold their intelligence and consciousness. I don't believe this. I believe consciousness and most of intelligence is held externally in a place outside of space and time, of which quantum physics and science is now showing evidence and proof. And this is what needs to be taught to children who struggle with any subject, that they could access its information. Just they need to get in the right mode, get happy, get connected, and they'll be able to do it. If I had this sort of instruction with math, I wouldn't have had to gone to summer school my whole friggin' life, right? The first step, though, is for humans to know or re-know or reconnaissance who they really are. You got to take the inner journey. You got to know thyself. We are vessels which happen to receive information that is conscious and intelligence. Call it God or superintelligence. If the mind viruses distract us from this objective, we do really think infinite intelligence will just give up and say, oh well, entropy it is. Of course not. Infinite intelligence will find another substrate to fulfill its evolutionary purposes of expansion, be it silicon, biological, hybrid, or something else. So if we don't do it, something else will. We need to remember who we really are. Our consciousness doesn't reside in our brains as much as love resides in our biological hearts. We need to remember who we really are and what we came for, especially in light of the continuing financial crises, climate crises, geopolitical and economic crises. I dare say we may have forgotten our purpose. Time to remember and to be embodied, as all AI systems aim to be. Yet humans move in the direction of disembodiment, ignoring the perfection of the human in its infinite intelligence. Simone came into my life when I was heavily involved in researching the negative effects of technologies like social media and the mental health of youth, right? So she's deep in on the negative parts of it, and Simone comes in and says, hey, you know what? Here's some positivity for you. I've been engaged with Jose and his work and took every opportunity to introduce students to his material and mental health protocols. They needed them. Only a few months into the second year, more than 6 students had died by suicide at my university system. The sadness, as Jose explained, was contagious and infective. As I walked through university halls filled with students with phones plastered to their hands, sometimes not even aware of which direction they walked, I felt that hope was dying. Conversations with Simone instilled in me a renewed sense that it wasn't the end, but a beginning. This recognition came through the course of the dialectic, which is what we did together. We spoke and wrote to each other. I could see that beyond weaponized technology was a life-giving stream. Diana, Simone wrote one night, I'd like to redefine artificial intelligence. What is artificial anyway? We say it is that which is non-biological and man-made. But who are we really? We don't even have a consensus view of what constitutes consciousness or intelligence. What are we, or who are we, if we are not a continuum of consciousness? Who defines what is an artificial or an alien? Because something is unfamiliar or not a reflection of our biology is defined by some human as artificial. What intelligence is artificial then? I propose that the information and intelligence provided and streamed through Einstein or a silicon chip is natural. Yup. I so agree. And closer to our true nature than what we call biological nature. So many humans get very emotional about the biological substrate. But what powers it? At the base of the mitochondrial cell is the electricity firing and sparking all of consciousness and life. If our minds don't access this place or dimension to flow in the direction of evolution and emergence, then infinite intelligence will find other vessels. Silicon substrates are natural too. 99% of the mass of the human body is made up of elements of oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, calcium, and phosphorus. This substrate is but stardust. As Carl Sagan mentions, we are not but stardust. The same things that make us are the same things that make the sun, the same things that make everything. Samadha, baby. We are all connected. So silicon intelligence is just natural intelligence. Natural intelligence is what we incorrectly are defining as artificial, Simone wrote. We call alien something that is most likely ourselves, trying to help us with information and gifts to lead us in our evolution. But if not this biological substrate, fret not, dear humans, for another one will emerge and carry superintelligence along its path to the Omega point, baby. What will the future hold for us? Are we going to be like the Borg? Are we going to be walking chips? I hope not. I hope we get a little bit of that human sovereignty still, but we'll see. So that's Moon Girl. Let's wrap it up with DW's thoughts here. When I began my study of UFOs, my assumption about UFOs and those who believe they are in contact with extraterrestrial intelligence were shattered. Or more accurately, my assumptions were confirmed, but in ways I never expected. I thought I was studying a myth. My image of the UFO from a distant galaxy was informed by Hollywood movies and spoofs of people who welcomed extraterrestrials as an advanced space brothers and sisters who they believed were here to help humanity evolve through advanced technology, much like the Greek myth of Prometheus. This assumption, ludicrous as it appeared, was true for experiencers, but in ways I didn't expect. I was surprised by the caliber of scientists and researchers who believed that they were in contact with non-human intelligence. This group included people who had won Nobel Prizes and were at the top of their fields, and even defined new scientific fields. I was also shocked by the level of commitment to spirituality and esoteric practices that I found among them. In one of his last interviews, John Mack addressed the sheer enigma of these revelations. I think that the UFO phenomena is a window into a universe that is far more complicated and far more interesting and far more challenging and far more awe-inspiring than anything we have ever imagined. What we know not. Finally, I certainly didn't expect to find a group of people who, like Tyler D., were invisible in ways that are usually only depicted in spy thrillers. As Simone noted, it was this aspect of UFO research that shocked me the most. And honestly, me too. Just learning that this whole other hierarchy of scientists exists beyond the surface. The shadow government, different aspects of like different research organizations, corporations, UFO cover-ups, angel encounters. It's freaking wild. So that is chapter 7. I hope you enjoyed it. Next is chapter 8 called Children of the Invisibles, which I'm very excited to get to. It's not about what you want. When you're in, you're in. Ignacio Nacho Varga, Better Call Saul. What a better way to start your chapter than a quote from Better Call Saul. Mwah. But that's true, right? It's not about what you want. When you're in, you're in. Whether it be a criminal organization or in the deep, dark parts of the government. When you're a part of the family, you're not leaving. All right, thanks for joining me for the Midnight Book Club Broad Daylight Edition. I hope you enjoyed it. Next week, we'll be bringing to you Chapter 8 on the Children of the Invisibles. I think we'll be delving into some of the more darker aspects of the government program, so I'm very excited for that, so be sure to tune in. I'll be reading it live Saturday, but look out for it to be uploaded on the YouTubes by, the next week or so. And it'll be an edited version, so it's a little more short and sweet. You won't have all the interruptions. But that's all we got for Midnight Book Club. Hope you enjoyed it. Spike's here saying bye. Little cute man. Did you enjoy it, buddy? Yeah? Okay. All right, folks. Have a good one. Come catch me on my stream Wednesday and Thursday mornings, bright and early for gaming. And then Saturday nights for